How do you go from being a regional champion to a global powerhouse? Practically overnight. I mean, that's the multi-billion-dollar question, right? And it's right at the heart of Tata Motors' massive bet on its future. So, let's get into it and unpack the strategy behind one of the boldest moves the auto industry has seen in a long time.
Okay, so to really get why they made this enormous move, you first have to understand the corner they were in. There's no doubt about it, Tata was the undisputed king of commercial vehicles on their home turf. And this chart, it shows you exactly what we're talking about. Tata commands a whopping 40% of the entire Indian market. That is a position of incredible strength. But here's the thing. In an industry that's shifting so fast towards global platforms and new tech, just being the king of one kingdom, well, it isn't enough anymore. Tata knew it had two huge critical gaps it needed to fill if it was going to compete on the world stage.
And here's the real kicker. First, they just didn't have true global scale. Their footprint outside of India was pretty small. And second, and this might be the even bigger deal, they needed to get their hands on next-generation powertrain technology, and fast. We're talking electric, hydrogen, all the stuff you absolutely need to compete in a zero-emissions future. Trying to develop all that in-house would take a decade. They didn't have a decade. They needed a shortcut, and they needed it like yesterday.
And the answer they came up with, well, it was a single, absolutely audacious move. They decided to go out and buy the commercial vehicle and powertrain business of a European giant, Iveco Group.
Just take a second and let that number sink in. 3.8 billion euros, all cash. Look, this wasn't some small strategic investment. This was a massive, all-in bet to fundamentally remake the entire company. So how on earth do you justify a price tag that big? Well, it all boils down to three brilliant strategic decisions that made this deal happen.
All right, decision number one. This was all about buying scale. But, and this is the really clever part, it wasn't about scale in the usual way you might think. This was something much, much smarter.
Just look at this table. The change is, well, it's night and day. This is the before and after shot. In a single move, Tata goes from being a big regional player to a top 4 global manufacturer. Boom. Just like that. Their key markets explode from just India to include Europe and Latin America, and their revenue gets a very nice bump. What they did was buy a shortcut, effectively leapfrogging decades of slow, painful, and super expensive organic growth. And this quote? It absolutely nails the thinking behind the deal. The goal here wasn't to save a few bucks by closing factories or laying people off. The real prize was getting their hands on Iveco's established network, its sales channels, its brand recognition in those mature, hard-to-crack Western markets. It's a fantastic strategy to balance their own high-growth home market with the stable, high-tech markets of the West.
Okay, so you've got the money, you've got the target. Simple, right? Well, not so fast. Buying a major European industrial champion isn't as easy as just wiring the money. There was a huge political hurdle they had to get over, one that could have tanked the whole deal before it even started.
And that hurdle has a name: golden power. You can think of it like a special veto the Italian government has to block foreign takeovers of companies it considers vital to the nation's security and interests, and a big chunk of Iveco's business fell right into that sensitive category.
So how did Tata get around this? Honestly, with pure strategic genius. They were incredibly pragmatic about it. First, they identified the real political hot potato, Iveco's defense and firefighting businesses. Super sensitive. So their solution was simple and elegant. Just carve them out. They told the Italian government, you can keep those strategic parts. This let Tata focus on the real prize, the commercial trucks and the advanced engines, while making the government happy and keeping the deal alive. It was just a masterclass in de-risking a very complicated deal.
And that brings us to the third and maybe the most fascinating decision of them all, because it's a strategy Tata has used before with unbelievable success. They decided to pull out what's famously known as the JLR playbook, named after their legendary acquisition of Jaguar Land Rover.
You know how most big mergers go, right? The new owner comes in, starts consolidating everything, slashing costs to find synergies, and very often they end up breaking the very thing they just bought. Tata's approach is the complete opposite. The JLR playbook is all about granting autonomy. It's about protecting the brand, the culture, and the talent that you paid all that money for in the first place.
And this wasn't just talk. They put their money where their mouth was, with a whole set of concrete promises. They guaranteed the headquarters would stay in Turin, Italy. They guaranteed no layoffs and no plant closures for at least 2 years. And most importantly, They pledged to protect Iveco's brand and its world-class engineering culture. Now, this wasn't just smart politics to get the government and unions on their side. It was incredibly smart business. They knew they weren't just buying factories. They were buying decades of R&D and a culture of innovation. A heavy-handed approach would have sent all that talent running for the doors, destroying the value of their investment.
So, there you have it. This one deal completely transforms Tata from a regional player into a global giant. They paid a huge price to get instant scale and a technological shortcut into the future. But a bet this big, especially one that's so hands-off, comes with some equally massive risks.
And yeah, let's not forget how they paid for it. The deal needed almost 3.9 billion euros in bridge financing. That is a ton of debt, and it puts immense pressure on this new combined company to perform, all while operating under this very light touch management style.
So now, the case comes to you. I really want to know what you think. Looking at all the pieces, was this a complete masterstroke, a textbook case of smart globalization? Or did Tata overpay, biting off more than it can chew with a really complex company? And maybe the biggest question of all, will that legendary JLR playbook, the hands-off approach that worked so well before, actually succeed a second time on an even bigger stage? It's a fascinating question, and there's no easy answer.